Hey, room 7. So we're going to continue with Ms Bixby's last day, finishing up Bran's chapter. So last we left off, we learned about how she was helping him to get groceries since his dad wasn't able to take him to the store every day. His dad is kind of giving up on his physical recovery from the accident. And Bran leaves us a little bit at that chapter, a little bit of a cliffhanger. He says Ms Bixby would always just drop him off. But one day she stayed because they had to go to the emergency room. But where we start the chapter, the second half of the chapter, he is fast forwarding back to St. Mary's Community Hospital where Ms Bixby is. So we know in this story there's flashbacks and then it kind of goes present and then we might flash back again later in the chapter. St. Mary's Community Hospital invites us through the automatic revolving doors with a rush of cool air. I've spent a lot of time in hospitals, more than I think is fair for someone my age. I know what to expect. First the lobby, so unhospital-like, set up like a grand entrance to a hotel. Down to the fancy chairs and the grand piano that mostly just sits there and played. A vast space complete with carpet and a Starbucks and a Hallmark gift shop and a map that shows that you are here. The sun pours through the glass walls, reaches halfway down the halls, and the only sign that you're in a building where people often come to die is the empty wheelchair sitting by the elevators. We walk in and Topher whispers for us to be cool and act normal, though he's the one limping and glancing nervously around. There is a security guard standing by the elevators and another behind the information desk. The only spot in the lobby that's at all crowded is a little window that says billing and payment support, where there's a line of adults shuffling papers waiting for their turn. I've been in that line before. This would be easier if we had an adult to latch onto, I think, just someone to follow behind. We must stick out, 3 sixth graders walking way too close together, hissing at and jostling each other. Of course, the last time we enlisted an adult's help, he stole our money and used it to buy a bottle of hooch. Just keep walking, I tell Topher, straight for the elevators. The guy at the desk doesn't even look up from his computer as we circle around. I look at the giant clock hanging above the desk. It's 1:22 on a Friday afternoon. I used to look forward to Friday afternoons. Can I help you boys find something? We freeze, right outside the hall leading to the elevators. The security guard who stopped us puts a thumb through his belt, setting it right by his gun. I'm sure it's just a habit, but it's unnerving. I suddenly start to wonder what is the protocol for hospital security like? If our packs will be searched, that would be bad. According to his badge, the security guard's name is Pete. No, sir, we're just visiting our grandmother. She had a heart attack and is recovering from surgery. Sorry to hear that, the guard says, and you know from his tone that he probably says that 100 times a day. I don't add anything to the story. I hope Topher doesn't either, but his overactive imagination has a pipeline directly to his always open mouth. So a little metaphor there, it's kind of funny. His overactive imagination has a pipeline directly to his always open mouth. Kind of a roast there. Oh, it's all right, he says brightly. Maybe now she'll stop smoking 3 packs a day. The guard cocks his head to the side. But before he can ask anything else, the closest elevator chimes and the doors slide open. We huddle in, still pressed close together, even though we have the whole elevator to ourselves. Steve hits the button for the 4th floor. He has the number memorized. I do too, actually. 3 packs a day, I say. The details are what make it believable, Topher retorts. The doors close, and for a second, the whole world drops out from under me. That's how it felt 5 weeks ago, so now we're flashing back. Like the earth had split, and I had been standing right on the crack. It was the last Friday in March, 4 days before April Fool's. It was the last Friday I spent with Ms Bixby. There was nothing remarkable about that afternoon. I think Pepsi was on sale instead of Coke, and there was a promotion to celebrate the start of baseball season. Buy one, get one free on hot dog buns. which I was told not to fall prey to, and did anyways. We spent some time looking over flowers that were set up outside, and Ms Bixby taught me the difference between annuals and perennials. Then she quoted something about the flame that burns twice as bright, burning half as long, which she insisted was from a Chinese philosopher, but I was pretty sure it came from a movie. I splurged and bought popsicles that day. They don't have time to melt when your teacher drives you home and drops you off, and your father never asks how you managed to get them home. He only wants to know if you're making something for dinner and what it is. Ms Bixby bought 5 quarts of blueberries that day. I remember. I counted them as she loaded them on the conveyor belt. I said she was going to be very busy. She said, "Thank you very much." As we left, we stopped by a group of teenagers dressed in pink, collecting money to fight breast cancer. Ms Bixby dug through her purse and gave them a 5. I chipped in $1. I didn't know, of course. She hadn't told us yet. We loaded the car and she drove slowly back to my neighborhood, tapping gently on the wheel to some golden oldie on the radio. I said something about summer not being far away, and she asked her if she had any plans, any vacation or grand adventures. I was building to something, a bigger question, a question that concerned both of us. She might be around, she said. Hard to tell at this point. I was about to ask her what she meant by that when she turned the corner onto my street and stopped the car. There, in the amber glow of the afternoon sun, I saw him, sprawled out on the front porch, his walker tipped over at the bottom of the steps to the walkway, one arm hanging over the step. He wasn't moving. "Is that?" she asked. I just sat there and nodded dumbly. I couldn't move or speak. Ms Bixby took out her cell phone and called 911 as the popsicles in the trunk began to melt. The head nurse, so we're flashing forward again. The head nurse, who is sitting at the station directly facing the elevators, watches us spill out, her hand poised above her keyboard, head twisted around like Alexander's owl. She is dressed in mint green scrubs. A collection of badges hangs around her neck. "The gatekeeper," Topher whispers. I really can't imagine what goes on in his head. "Maybe you should let me do the talking," I say. After all, I'm not sure how many fake grandmothers Topher can nearly kill off in a day. To my surprise, he nods. The name on the front tag says she is Georgia Bonner, RN. I'm sure she's friendly. She's a nurse. You can't go into nursing if you hate people. But then I think about teachers, and not all of them are what you'd expect. They can't all be the good ones. "Can I help you boys?" she says curtly as we approach. "We are here to see Maggie Bixby," I respond coolly. "When all else fails, tell the truth, just not the whole truth." "I'm sorry, but Miss Bixby is not seeing visitors right now, only family." "Oh, we're family," Topher chirps up from behind us. I turn to glare at him. He shuts his mouth, but it's too late. I look back at Georgia and smile. "We're her nephews," I say, running with it. "I'm adopted," Steve adds helpfully. "From Japan." Nurse Georgia's eyes are powder blue and narrow, inspecting us with a frown. "Are you here with your parents?" She's clearly not buying it. Maybe she knows more about Miss Bixby's family than we do. After all, I only know she got divorced before she had kids, and that she had an older brother in the army. I'm not even sure he's married. Maybe she has no nephews. "They're down in the gift shop," I say. "They couldn't agree on a card. Dad likes the ones that sing when you open them, but Mom thinks they're annoying. They said we could go ahead and come up and see. Auntie Maggie's in 428, right?" It really is all in the details. The nurse consults her computer, then looks back at us. I know she thinks we're BSing her. "What happened to your lip?" she asks, noticing Steve, who is sort of hiding behind Topher and me. "I got punched," he says, then points at me. "His fault." "You punched him?" she asked. "I ducked," I say. Nurse Georgia nods slowly. "Right. And what's in the bags? Homework?" "Homework," I confirm quickly before Topher can think of something outlandish to say. In this case, the truth, this isn't going well either. I glance down the hall, looking at the numbers printed on the doors. There's no way she's going to let us pass. I'm just about to let loose. Tell her everything like I did back at Michelle's, when Nurse Georgia sighs and started to flex like a pop tire. All right, she says at last. You boys have 10 minutes. No more. Your aunt, she adds with too much emphasis, needs her rest. We all nod, no doubt, looking like a pack of eager puppies waiting to go for a walk. And be quiet, please. There are some very sick patients on this floor, and they need their rest, too. Yes, ma'am, we all chip in unison. Nurse Georgia smiles, finally, and points us around the corner. I tell her thanks and give Steve a nudge, hoping that we get out of here before she changes her mind. We are almost to the turn when she calls out, "And boys?" We stop and turn. She points to the greased, spotted sack, fries, in Topher's hand. Ms Bixby's on a strict diet, just so you know. Yes, ma'am, I say. We understand. No fries. Can't imagine what she'd say about the whiskey and cheesecake. And a little flashback. I didn't eat that night. The night she drove us to the emergency room, doing 60 miles an hour to keep up with the ambulances. We were there all night, but I wasn't hungry at all. Miss Bixby bought me a muffin from the cafeteria, apple cinnamon. Most of it ended up in the trash, the parts she didn't end up eating herself. She stayed with me until the night ended, while the ER physicians and neurologists on call ran their tests and performed their procedures, x-rays and blood tests, brain scans and more tests I can't even pronounce. They said my father probably slipped trying to navigate through the door with the walker. That was their word, navigate, like he's a ship's captain lost at sea. He knocked himself unconscious when he fell and suffered a concussion. That much was clear. But they wanted to make sure he hadn't done any more damage to his spine, which meant more tests and hours of waiting. The nurses asked me a lot of questions, and I told them the truth. Maybe not the whole truth, but pretty close. I told them that it was just him and me at home, that I wasn't sure what he did while I was at school all day, but that he mostly stayed in his chair and watched TV when I was home. I told them that we didn't get much help and mostly made do on our own. One of the nurses asked Ms Bixby if she was Dad's girlfriend. I felt like hitting the guy for some reason, but Ms Bixby just laughed it off and said she was a family friend. They brought us both coffees from the lobby, and Miss Bixby doctored mine, loading it with enough milk and sugar to make it sippable. She did everything she could to distract me while we waited for updates. We played tic-tac-toe on the back of pamphlets for diabetes. We paced laps around the waiting room. Mostly we just sat and talked, or I talked. I told her things I never had before, things that would have ruined our Friday afternoons, like about how much I wish I had a mother, and the hard time my dad had when I was growing up, and what it has been like for the past year and a half, watching him just fading away, sort of blending into the background of the living room, taking less and less interest in the world around him. She listened like she always did, patiently, intently, nodding until I finished. And I waited for it, the Bixbyism, the one quote from Lao Tzu or Benjamin Franklin or Mick Jagger that would put it all into perspective and make it better. But it never came. Maybe she didn't have one. Maybe she'd run out of inspirational sayings. Instead, she just told me she was sorry. That life just sucked sometimes. Then, she put her arms around me the way I imagined my mother probably would have. That's how the doctor found me, sitting on the waiting room couches with Miss